My name is ADANNA. I'm the founder and CEO of ADANNA. Architecture and fashion both practice the same design principles. You know, when you look good, you feel good. I definitely don't think African luxury is linear, or at least it shouldn't be linear. Don't have an excuse. I can't just say I can't do it because what happens to my team? And they're surprised that the diaspora is looking for their people in these high fashion spaces, but they are. Set the tone that if you think you expect something from me, think again.
Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.
ADANNA is a first daughter, and she's someone that cares a lot about community and pushing a narrative forward that benefits not only just herself, but a collective. You know, you don't have real purpose if it only benefits yourself. Aspiring architect, I graduated, of course, Architecture, University of Hartford in Connecticut, US. But design has always been my love language since I was small. The idea of creation, the idea that I can take something from my mind and bring it to life. So that's who ADANNA is.
You trained as an architect. So what inspired you to leave architecture to build a brand in the fashion industry?
I get this question a lot actually, and I'm not surprised. From the outside looking in, it seems like it's such a harsh pivot, but from the inside out, it's actually not that surprising. I truly feel like architecture and fashion both practice the same design principles, although they're two different disciplines. Architecture is more of a larger scale design, and then of course fashion is a smaller scale, but both rely on the same principle of, can it stand? Does it serve its function? So if you look at it from that lens, really, it's not really that far-fetched that I decided to venture into fashion, other than the fact that I have a strong interest in fashion and I've always seen myself owning a fashion brand and doing what I'm doing. I have people that I looked up to that really influenced this decision. People like Virgil Abloh, rest in peace to him. Although he didn't study architecture specifically, he studied civil engineering. But the pivot, I understood his train of thought when it came to, okay, let me go into my streetwear brand. Let me go into, being the creative director of Louis Vuitton, Off-White, everything like that. It's not foreign to me why he did it. I completely understand his thought process behind it. When you study the discipline of engineering, it's not hard to start to recognize that a lot of things take engineering. Fashion design is really no different. I know that people may see it as pieces of clothing being sewn together, but there's a lot of math and consideration and structure that goes into fashion design and making a piece actually work, especially for the women's body. Another silent hero, not really a public figure, but my, silent hero is my mom. I used to study biology, oddly enough, but when I pivoted into architecture, thanks to her as well, she reminded me that, my talent is not only good for one thing. I can branch into many different things, honestly, if I wanted to, and fashion design would be no different. She always knew that I had an eye for fashion, eye for aesthetics, things that, are different or appealing. So she was really my push. She was the catalyst behind this whole movement. So shout out to my mom.
All right. So what architectural principles shows up most in your designs?
The architecture principle that shows up a lot in my design process is structure. I really, really like the idea of structure. I would say the rest of the principles show up pretty evenly, but structure is a huge one. I'm really into corsetry, only because I feel like without structure, it can't work. So I like to really focus on like the bare bones of the process, what's working, what's not working, and how can we even dress up that element of structure and design. Architecture, you can use structure in so many different ways. You can make, for example, the barest of materials within an architectural space or a design space. You can turn it into a design element. I feel like playing with the structure is so limitless. So it's something that I really like to emphasize and focus on because one, it determines the quality of any type of product that you're doing, no matter the scale, whether it's a building or a jacket. So I really like to take, into consideration. That's why I really, really like corsetry. Corsetry is like one of my favorite pieces as far as women's wear. It's women's favorite piece. It's the most flattering. There's so much that you can do with corsetry. Honestly, it doesn't even have to be so bare. You can hide corsetry in so many different ways, and I feel like it's something that I definitely can't wait to explore and show people when the brand is live. Another design element that I like to really tap into is silhouettes. I feel like silhouettes can say so many things. Silhouette is where you observe from up close. The basics, really, the fundamentals, I really like to play with. I really like to experiment with. How can you dress up those fundamentals? How can you tell a different story based on the structure that you're working with? It's all really the same thing. Structure also shows up in the way that I developed the internal systems of my brand. It's something that I really, really want to emphasize and make known. I come from a great country, Nigeria. We are a very great country, but there is something that we lack, and it's usually consistency and systems that support that consistency. Um, Many reasons, come into play on why that is, but to divorce from that, I really took a lot of time and attention to build internal systems so my brand can run even without me being there. So I can oversee everything really just from one dashboard. Consistency and structure matter a lot to me, and it's a design element that I carry through whatever I'm doing, whether it's the system, whether it is the product, whether it is the space. Everything that you do, everything that design stems from, whether it's the product, whether it's the business, whether it is the literal house, everything starts with the foundation. If your foundation has cracks in it, everything else really doesn't matter. It won't last that long. So I think that's really why I focus on structure as far as an architectural design principle, because it's the most important one, and I really want to perfect that and get that down.
Adana isn't just a fashion brand, it feels like a visual language. So, what story does your brand tell in its own voice?
No, ADANNA isn't just a fashion brand. I always tell my team ADANNA is a conversation. There are so many different elements that ADANNA will explore, not just clothing. And that may sound foreign to people, especially those who don't really understand the fashion world, because the focus to them is just clothing. But I like to think as the brand, which, of course, another quote from Virgil Abloh, if you put a candle in a garage or some abandoned place, it looks like trash. But if you put it in an art gallery, suddenly it becomes this masterpiece, this statement. And so, what does that tell you? That tells you that you have to build a world around your product. That product, once again, could be a house, it could be your actual business, it could be the clothing itself. Product is really fluid. Building that world around your product it takes a lot of different elements. So, how you approach people, what do you say to people? What do you offer people that they can't buy? That's not just buying clothing. What do you offer them? If I only just focus on putting out clothes, I have failed as a creative director, if I'm being honest. Although, yes, it is the most important thing internally. I have to make sure that the clothes speak very well of itself. But as far as, how I direct my marketing team and my sales team, if the clothing is the only thing that is being spoken to them, I have failed. As far as the artistic direction of ADANNA, the story that we want to tell is the story of a woman, a story that a lot of women face, a lot of women relate to, I should say. I'm a first daughter. ADANNA is given to the first daughter in Igbo culture. And, but I'm not the only first daughter in the world. First daughters and our role is acknowledged in a lot of different cultures. We may not carry the same name, but the feeling is felt. And so, what does a first daughter feel like? What do they do in their everyday? What do they talk about? That is the story that I'm trying to tell. Who is the type of woman that wears ADANNA? How do we think? What do we care about? What social topics currently bother us at the moment we want to expand on? I want ADANNA to almost feel like a living, breathing vessel outside of just the product. And it's something that I'm very, very passionate in. When I design the studio space and I put the photography studio in the back, having that to our disposal whenever we want to is because I want the liberty and I want the freedom to constantly create new stories whenever we need to respond to a conversation, because like I said, ADANNA is also a conversation. It's not just a fashion brand.
As the founder and creative director of ADANNA, what emotion do you hope someone feels the moment they put on your products?
The emotion that I hope women in particular feel putting on ADANNA is the emotion of courage, self-assurance, purpose. I'm very purpose driven, intentionality. Everything that enables them to become the higher version of themselves is the feeling that I want to evoke for ADANNA women. When you look good, you feel good. And when you look good, you feel like you can conquer any room. People close deals faster. It's a proven thing. And so I want ADANNA women to feel like the boss in their life. And that is really supported by the business model that we exhibit, made to order, having it tailored to you. It speaks well, imagine you're telling someone, oh, I have this tailored to me. It's a one of one. It's, exactly like, fitted to me. It adds extra width on your shoulders, I should say. There's a certain bravado that's felt. I want the ADANNA woman to sit with their back straight up. I want them to feel powerful, because that's how I like to feel, especially when I'm in something that's been designed for me and tailored to me. I definitely feel way more secure than I already feel on a daily basis in like a t-shirt and leggings, but I want ADANNA to be the go-to when it comes to, I'm going to go out and conquer the world. I'm going to take over the world today. Today was tough, but I'm tougher. I want ADANNA to be that statement brand that aligns with that feeling.
You operate with the model made to order, which is slow, intimate, and incredibly intentional. So why choose this model when fast fashion is easier and cheaper?
Made to order is slow. It is very intimate and is incredibly intentional. And to some people, that could be seen as a minus, especially in a world where everything is like this, like this. It's almost like microwave society. But that's exactly the reason why I love the business structure that I chose, because I care. I care so much about every single thing that the brand represents, what leaves the brand, what we put out there. I care, and I want people to know that when I design their piece, or when, they're made, their order that's been tailored to their body goes out, I want them to know that I looked at it, I considered it, and I put my best foot forward before its release, and I feel like that level of care enables security, especially for women. Women like to be thought about. We like to be considered, and as a woman, I understand that. So why not pour that level of awareness into what I do? And it's also a business model that works for us as far as, the numbers. Honestly, we'll have way less inventory issues. Like, inventory issues is something that I wanted to minimize. And when you have a made to order brand with a few ready to wear pieces here and there, which will definitely be there, but as far as it being predominantly made to order, it will be made as the demand comes in. And so what does that mean? It's more sustainable. We don't have to waste so much buying excessive, like, in preparation for what. And you get to be more detailed, honestly. So everything, every order, every inventory refill that we do is intentional. It's considered, it's thoughtful, and it's less wasteful. I hate being I hate being wasteful. I'm a very resourceful person, so it only made sense for me to take this approach. I'm not really into the whole fast fashion thing. Yeah, okay, is it cheaper? Sure, it's cheaper, but I don't do cheap. I don't live my life, cheaply. I'm sorry. It's just when you move at that standard, you can tell. And so I want the ADANNA women to also be invited into that standard. And so, fast fashion, it's okay. Like, whatever floats your boat. I'm not one to, I can't dictate what you do, but that's not the lane that I decide to participate in. Made to order just works so much better for me.
You operate in the fashion industry. So tell us one thing the world misunderstands about African luxury.
One thing that the world misunderstands about African luxury, me saying now, it's quite odd to say, because I almost feel like people don't understand how rich African luxury is. If anything, I feel like we do the luxury the best. I feel like people who indulge in luxurious things like to live interesting lives. And I feel like we are very interesting people. We have this bravado that can't be replicated. We carry ourselves in a different way. The color schemes we experiment with, our versatility, it's built for luxury. And I feel like we almost do it the best. Maybe that's bias, but I feel like I have the right to that. I am an African woman. But I feel like we're almost undermined in a lane that I feel like we own, dare I say. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand that. I don't understand why, African luxury would it not be considered to be anything but rich. I feel like we exclude richness. It's in our DNA, it's in our food, it's in our language, it's in our color schemes, um, it's in our women. So, yeah, no matter the genre that we explore, because I definitely don't think African luxury is linear, or at least it shouldn't be linear, because I do consider myself to be quite unconventional. But even though I don't really dabble in the traditional African luxury in a sense, I feel like my culture can still be felt because it's in our DNA. We have a flamboyance that is hard to find anywhere else. So, yeah, I feel like we're one of ones, and it's something that is not understood enough worldwide.
As the founder and creative director of your business, how do you plan or how do you scale a made to order brand without losing the soul that makes it special?
How to scale a made to order brand without losing the soul is a question I ask myself all the time. And I feel like it's a question I'm going to continue asking myself because if I don't check in on a consistent basis about where my soul is at, then I'm failing, especially as a founder and a leader. I feel like you scale made to order without losing the soul of it by keeping your soul intact, whoever the leadership is. As soon as your intention and your integrity starts to sway, well, the soul will also go with it. It's not about always being understood because I know sometimes people might perceive that the soul has been lost, but the soul might have evolved. But as long as leadership knows that the soul is intact, the intention, the integrity, as long as you prioritize those things above numbers, which sounds backwards, but it promotes longevity, in my opinion. You have to put purpose before profit always, no matter how expensive your pieces are, or no matter how accessible or inexpensive your pieces are. You have to put purpose before profit. So as long as your purpose is intact, it's evolving, it's prioritized. I feel like soul isn't something that would be easily bargained, and it's a consistent check. Like you have to consistently check in with yourself and your being. Sometimes burnout promotes lack of integrity. Sometimes the pace promotes it. So you have to check in and be like, okay, am I in a mental space right now where I am prioritizing the purpose? And if I'm not, maybe slow down. You have to be willing to put your well-being and timing first before any outside expectation. I really think external validation is a killer to scaling your brand. And that sounds so backwards, but if you really look at people who have done it so well, they always have their values in place first before anything. So I would say that, learning how to pace yourself, learning what's for you and what's not for you. Not every opportunity is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a distraction. Just having your priorities in check, I feel like preserves the soul of the brand. And it's really up to leadership to make sure that they're following those principles to make sure that their brand stays steady. Longevity beats speed anytime.
You are building sustainable production system in Nigeria. What challenges you to innovate daily as the founder and creative director of ADANNA?
It's funny when an abundance of people experience lack or inconsistencies, although obviously there's a lot of negatives about it. I have my own opinions about how this country should be going, but doesn't everybody? But as we're in the now, as far as what I can do, the power that I have, understanding, first of all, the well being and welfare of my team, understanding the struggles that they face, outside of the studio. It's my, remote team. Um, the things I encounter on a daily basis, as far as my work life, making sure that I'm considerate of those things and studying where I can fill in that gap if it's in my power, or where I can kind of, I don't know if I should say be resourceful, hmm, or get crafty. Lack promotes ingenuity, in my opinion. You know, dare I say that it's why I feel the Black race is so creative. So, especially Africans are very creative people. We're very creative people. So, it's just all about finding three ways towards one solution. If way one doesn't work, try way two, way three, and even try a new way that hasn't been considered. So, well, you have the responsibility of building something stable for your team to thrive on. I feel like it's almost a no-brainer, and it's almost a non-negotiable that I make sure that I think every day, how do I make this better? Whether it's maybe spending more money or using we already have as a better alternative. I have to constantly think of those things and consider hiccups that we might have, whether it's tech issues, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's, water, whether it's, how do we work around it? Because if there's a will, there's a way. I'm a strong believer in that. So, with that in mind, especially since I don't have an excuse, I can't just say I can't do it, because what happens to my team? So it's a tough place to be in, but it's also a privileged place to be in, because I'm forced to use my brain more. And I feel like that's always a good thing. So I don't really mind. I'm into finding new ways that work. I'm into innovation and things getting better and progress. And find you don't find the weak spots that you can refine without running into trouble.
You are not just building a customer base, you are building a community around your brand, ADANNA. So tell us who the ADANNA woman is.
The ADANNA woman is decisive. The ADANNA woman is tenacious, audacious. She has authority. She goes after what others might find crazy. That's her normal. She lives in an elevated state. She's a mother, sister, friend, daughter. She is the catalyst. She's a leader. She's a conversation starter, maybe in good and bad ways, I don't know, but she's unforgettable. I want the ADANNA women to be women that have a strong sense of self. When I first thought of my brand and how I want the clothing to amplify, and I say amplify very in a calculated sense, because I don't want ADANNA women to feel like when they take off ADANNA, they stop being that woman. ADANNA simply amplifies the type of woman that you already are. I feel like I attract women that already have a strong sense of self, women who have a strong character, women who know their worth, and my pieces just match what's already inside of you. I'm here to, assist you in your shine. I'm not here to envelop who you are. And so I design clothing for strong characters, people who have a very strong sense of self. I really don't think people who waver in who they are would be attracted to my brand, which is very okay with me. I know my audience very, very well, and I know that they know what they like and they know what they don't like. Sometimes she's picky. I know I can definitely be picky, but that's because I know what I'm going for, and she has a very strong focus and a lot of discernment, and those are the type of women that I would be very happy to serve with open arms.
You have customers in the US and in the UK. So tell us what these customers have taught you about global appetite for African luxury.
The US and UK market have taught me that people crave, African luxury. I feel like we've been, used to a certain sense of luxury for a long time. And it's no shame to them. My hat's off to them. It's a lot of brands that I actually look up to, but I do feel like people are craving something new, and I feel like people specifically in the diaspora want to see what they're familiar with on a global stage. It's a strong craving. I feel like the market is definitely there. I've heard conversation about it happen on a consistent basis while I was in New York and even on social media. So they have taught me that it's time. it's time to step up and try and be that. Of course, not trying to be everything to everyone, but to push towards, to be a global luxury fashion house, as an African woman is a huge goal. There's a lot of African brands that I absolutely love. Kilantar, for example, Kai Collective. Um, I love designers like Vicky James, who did, beautiful wedding dresses. And I feel like they're all women that are working towards satisfying the needs of diaspora African women, and I'll be very grateful to join that conversation in my own unique way.
So tell us the role that storytelling play in convincing the world that Africa is not emerging but is leading.
Storytelling is an engine that Africans mastered before anyone else, dare I say. It can be debated, but I am biased. I feel like it's funny that I feel like we're very poetic people. We speak with in a lot of we have a way that we speak that you almost don't know, like unless you have the trained ear for it. They drop so much wisdom, and we have such a fantastic way of saying things, and so I feel like storytelling is our lane, and so using that element that I feel like we've already mastered so well, and us having a lot of rich stories to tell, especially a lot of forgotten stories due to history. I feel like we have a lot we want to say, and I feel like using that medium and broadcasting my brand the way that I hope to, I feel like it will help people connect the dots to understand that Africans kind of take the stage with storytelling. I feel like it's only not recognized because there's not enough resources, maybe, or opportunities to acknowledge that unless you're very familiar with the space already. But if you're not, there could be various reasons on why, it's not acknowledged. But I feel like I definitely want to use storytelling to set the tone. The visual eye that we have as well. And you can always tell that we do because of the way that we dress ourselves and the colors that we use. I feel like naturally we tell a lot of vibrant stories, and because we've mastered our own style, and you can observe this a lot even with Afro beats, we do our own thing, and that doesn't come from people who are followers, people who are leaders who finally get discovered, have the impact the way that we have, especially in music, and the way we do our music videos and everything like that, and the way that we really like to be really artistic with our visuals. I almost feel like our storytelling skill and the way that we do things is like finding diamond in the rough. It's always been there. It's very developed. It's very strong. It's very valuable. It just hasn't been discovered yet. But we've been doing our own thing. And honestly, we're good at minding our business, and the world will acknowledge it and then catch up because we're already ahead.
What's the boldest risk you have taken creatively, and how did it change your brand?
Like I mentioned earlier, I'm quite unconventional. I don't succumb myself to anything of like the status quo or any stigmas that's been placed on me being, a Nigerian woman, or any expectations. That's not rules that I feel like I have to follow in particular. I feel like I have my own narrative to share and my own way of doing things, and so that reflects a lot in my designs, and it will reflect a lot in my future designs because it's just a principle that I live by. But honestly, if I were to say two, it was the very first item that I released. Two outfits, had an assortment of pieces with each outfit. So let's say maybe 6 pieces in total, but it was completely out of crochet. And it takes so long to make. Obviously, it wasn't a very scalable product because it was just me doing it. But from the jump, honestly, from the first thing that I've ever released, it was a medium that isn't really explored because I really wanted to, one, experiment, test, the product market fit and everything like that. And then two, set the tone that if you think you expect something from me, think again. you know, uh, and then my collection that I dropped, Too Hot to Handle, the silhouettes, there's a lot of ruffles. If you notice, there's a lot of ruffles, beading, like, using the medium of crochet again, and then beading and like draping beads. It's not necessarily a new thing, but at least the way that I did it, I feel like it's quite unique, because once again, always like, what's a shock factor that we can add? How can we make this unique? How can we make this unforgettable? I feel like that's just like my design language is a principle that runs my design. So, um, honestly, everything I've done so far, honestly, if anything, what it has done for my brand is to lock in that principle that I should follow, that if I stick to it, if I stick to this unique perspective that I have, this bold perspective that I have, it'll always work out. I feel like you have to kind of be polar, you know, especially being a fashion designer, you have to have an identity that you stand on, an identity that you allow to evolve, but there are certain principles that will always stay true. And so I definitely take boldness into consideration with everything that I do. So it helps me stabilize my identity and the brand's identity.
As the founder and creative director of ADANNA, tell us where you see your brand in the next 5 years.
I see ADANNA cultivating a community, a rich community in Lagos, obviously reconnecting with my New York City people and, broadening our audience to UK, but most importantly, uniting the same type of women in different parts of the globe in one conversation. I see us getting more in tune with our community. I see us going to different locations, pop-ups, trunk shows. I'm very down for doing that. I love traveling. So, and I would love meeting like different women because women are so inspiring and it's a driving force behind expansion, in my opinion, who I'm doing it for. And so I see ADANNA becoming a broader conversation. And of course, not just like a broader catalog, of course. Now that we have this studio space to ourselves and we can set that tone of transparency, really inviting people into the process. I see us hosting events that have meeting, being a part of conversations that, for example, I have sickle cell anemia, so conversations that help women outside of fashion or, who aren't even in the fashion space, but just like people in general. I want us to stand for something. I want people to understand that we stand for something as a fashion brand. It's not just fashion here. And that when you wear our brand, it's because you align with the fact that you also stand for something. I think people will be surprised with the way that I handle ADANNA's public perception because I don't want us to be so linear. I don't want us to be too broad either, that we lose the plot, but I think that it will be perfectly balanced in a way that people understand that when you hear or see ADANNA, you see purpose. But of course, more collections, more clothing, runway shows, all the important stuff. But yeah, of course, more impact, more outreach, working with new faces, working with influencers, anyone who just loves what we have to bring. We want to see you.
Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.